Well, welcome everybody. It's great to see such a packed out room, and isn't it great to be back in person? I hope everyone's enjoying it. As we said, I'm Dan. I'm the Vice President of Computational Science and Digital Innovation at Shell. It's a real pleasure to be back at CogX. This is not my first time, but it's always a festival I really, really enjoy. With me today, I've got Ed Abbo from C3AI, Shane McArdle from Kongsberg, Phil Pyman from LyondellBasell, and Judit Prieto from Baker Hughes. And it's absolutely brilliant to have them with me. Maybe just to tee this off a little bit before I jump right into it. If you look at the overall world around us, I think everyone recognizes that energy transition is becoming a crucial topic. And what we see is a pressing need to move the global energy system towards lower carbon solutions. I think all of us here will agree that one of the key levers that we have to pull is that of digital technology. We see that digital technology has the ability to reduce global CO2 emissions very significantly. There was a recent report from the World Economic Forum that estimated it could be, when you include the mobility sector, as much as 20% of global CO2 could be reduced by the accelerated deployment of digital solutions. But what we want to talk about today is really the potential of open ecosystems to play a critical role in helping to accelerate that path towards net zero and to change the global energy system. We at Shell really believe that actually a combination of open ecosystems and open source, as well as open data, is going to be really fundamental in helping us to accelerate, because we recognize that we can't do it on our own. And we've been partnering with the organizations here to accelerate something which we call the Open AI Energy Initiative, which is one of the initiatives we're involved in, to help to bring together a digital ecosystem that can help to accelerate the digital transformation of our assets. But it's a controversial topic. Looking at the overall ability to get big companies and startups and tech companies working together on this is not easy. And so I'm hoping that we're going to have a challenging and somewhat difficult and provocative debate around some of these interesting areas. And we're going to try and bring out some of the dilemmas that we face set out on this journey. And I hope that you'll all learn something. And hopefully we'll get some good questions at the end. So maybe, Phil, I'll come to you first, as I said I would. So LyondellBasell, fantastic organization. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the organization and also tell me a little bit about the digital transformation that you're undergoing.
Well, yeah, thanks, Dan. Well, firstly, great to see you all here. It's great to be in front of so many people in 3D again. So it's probably been in a real room with real people. Well, LyondellBasell is a very large petrochemical plastics company, global operation. We operate in around 25 countries and sell in over 100 countries. So very large, complex global business with complex, long supply chains, very big assets, very complex assets, big energy consumers, etc. So obviously, there's so much potential value that we can go after in this space. Now, as such a company, as you'd imagine, we've had a very, very, very long history of sort of data-driven decision-making. Our plants have been very well instrumented. We have data, we have advanced process control systems. We've taken our assets to a certain level of performance through known existing technology. But of course, the pace of change in technological innovation now is such that the ability now to take us to whole new levels, to find sort of new benchmarks and new levels of performance that maybe we can't even dream about now, with the advances in technology and all we can do with data, really is what's exciting. So around 3 years ago, which is quite late to some industries, we began our digital transformation, and we started actually by looking outside. We're quite a, maybe you could say, quite a conservative industry traditionally, for good reason. We don't change things that quickly, but we recognize that whilst we have a very strong innovative culture, we invented many of the everyday chemicals and products you use in everyday life. We need to innovate in new areas, and that means realizing that you need to innovate with other people, with other technologies, with other companies, other organizations, startups, working in different ways. So we looked externally and we started to think, how can we build on our own expertise and bring in perspectives of others, always looking at how we can drive value, improve value for our employees, for our customers, for our shareholders. And you mentioned the energy transition, the challenges we face in the whole sustainability arena. It's obvious to all of us, I think, that technology is going to play an absolutely pivotal role in that. So I think the main thing I would say is we've got a very strong focus of innovation. We realize that we now need to innovate in places we don't have the core expertise necessarily. So being able to to partner, to collaborate with other players can help us move a lot quicker and get to levels of performance perhaps we wouldn't have dreamed of or been capable of on our own.
That's fantastic. And it's great to hear that openness and the way in which the industry is changing. And I think that's something that we really recognize as well. That's so important for us. Maybe, Shane, coming next to you, I guess, Kongsberg Digital obviously moving from a rich historical brand, if I can say that, in Kongsberg, but now moving into the digital space. Also trying to think about how can you work in new ways with traditional partners and with new partners, and also in potentially with competitors even. Is that hard for you to think about how to work with competition to support customers? How are you thinking about that as Kongsberg Digital?
No, and I think just picking up on what Dan said there as well, it's the energy industry, and by and large, the chemicals and all the value chain in between it. It's an industry that's very conventional. It doesn't change very, very quickly for good reason. It's a very critical, safety conscious industry as a number one reason. When we joined the OAI consortium like we have, of course, when we looked into that and we were asked to join it, we were saying, hey, but that company is doing what we're doing, and there's a little bit of an overlap there. But there's power in collaborative advocacy. Yeah. There's power in evangelizing as a group rather than evangelizing as an individual. If we are to change this industry, and it's like sometimes steering the Titanic with an oar, it's better to do that as a group. It's better to be in there with like-minded companies, like-minded startups, like-minded tech companies, operators that have had this just readiness and eagerness to really drive the transition that we need to do. So, and then once you get in there and you start saying, oh, actually, we have our strengths, they have their strengths. We collaborate quite well with C3 AI. Initially we were saying, oh, but we have an analytics piece, but they have an amazing analytics platform. So then we said, look, we're not going to build that anymore. so we said, why not partner?
Vice versa. 3D visuals.
Yeah. So we're really good at digital twins. That's what we do. So, and a lot of what we talk about from a digital twin perspective, it's like an integrator, right? So it's a place where you can lift your data, you end-to-end access to your data, you can enrich your data through what we do in C3, through that partnership. Then you can recontextualize it, put it against certain business processes, and that's what we're good at. That's what we're really good at. And it also helps us from a roadmap point of view as well to focus. So it's really good. Competition is good. And I think the OAI, since we're all on the same side, per se, it's a nice, safe arena for us to be part of.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think this is fun for me as well, because I get to ask some of the questions I always want to ask. So I'm going to ask Ed this. So
he's going off script.
I'm going off script, but that's a good thing. So Ed, you do this a lot, right? So you get a customer like us or like LyondellBasell that come to you and say, hey, we want you to work with someone who you might not naturally want to work with as part of a digital ecosystem, because it's in our interest as a customer to accelerate our digital transformation. And that's very much what happened here. But I know it's happened to you elsewhere as well. How do you deal with that? Because this is quite a threatening conversation. It's potentially impinging on your core IP. These are not necessarily people you naturally want to talk to. As a digital technology provider, how do you go about that? And how do you build the culture that enables that?
It's a good question, Dan. And so I'll point out first that I'm sitting on the stage with three of our customers. Judit at Baker Hughes, Phil at LyondellBasell, and then Dan at Shell. So this is a very dangerous spot. And but yeah, so we're partners, and maybe it's a good conversation. So just for context, C3 AI is an AI platform that allows our customers to actually develop AI applications rapidly themselves. So that's actually key. So we're making our customers self-sufficient. Now we're also developing applications. So AI for reliability, AI for production optimization, AI for production scheduling, etc. And so the idea of OAI actually came from a conversation between Dan, myself, and Judit. So the forming partners were Baker Hughes, C3 AI, and Shell. And the whole concept was when they build capability, our customers build capability, that they basically categorize it in two buckets. One is it's competitive IP that they want to retain for themselves. The other is it's capabilities that they want to actually deliver to the market to accelerate the energy transition. And if you take a step back on the energy transition, it is massive. It's a massive undertaking to take our existing infrastructure and basically switch it out so that it becomes, net zero, low carbon, etc. And so the only way to do this is with domain expertise from the likes of Shell and Baker Hughes and LyondellBasell, great technology, from C3AI, from Kongsberg, and many other partners. Because trying to do it yourself the way we used to in software, which is build everything ourselves, is just, you'll get there, but we'll all be dead by then. so that's the impetus to really partner. And we developed a very modular, open framework that actually lets you plug in any technology. It's called a model-driven architecture if you want to look that up. And we basically plug in whatever our customers want us to plug in because we actually trust that they're giving us the right market signal to accelerate unlocking value for them. So short answer to your question.
No, I love it. It's super. And I'm loving the fly on the wall conversations because I'm going to come to Judit now. So talk to me about how this goes in a company like Baker Hughes. Because of course you have a long history of developing deep proprietary technology, if I can put it that way, for the energy and oil and gas sectors, very successfully. All of a sudden you've got pressure from customers, from technology partners to be much more open. How do you think about that? And again, how do you make the case internally?
Yeah, no, that's a great question and not always an easy answer. Baker Hughes is an energy technology company for those that may not be familiar. And we provide a range of hardware, software, and services, ultimately to try to bring energy in a more efficient, reliable way. We provide across 120 countries. When it comes to manufacturing and engineering, there is no doubt on why we are innovators, why we are in the market, and why customers trust us. In the moment that you have software solutions, that it is not core your expertise, but you do understand your space of the domain, like Shane was saying, right? Then you need to have the decision to say, well, do I want to play by myself and then recreate what Ed and C3 has already done, or what Shell, some of the applications they already done, or should we try to aim and combine forces and just drive at a speed? I think one area is the speed, but the other area is the investment. And when you look at in the energy world and, primarily oil and gas companies, for that matter, any industry, the amount of dollars invested in their digital transformation has been humongous. Yet, not always everybody sees the adoption to the rate that the leadership would like. And so this is an opportunity to start saying, well, let me try to bring to the table what I'm best, and let me try to surround myself of other people's capabilities and other strong organizations that can help me to be even better, even greater.
Yeah.
And I love that point. And I think it's so important because I think for us, a lot of this has been saying, what are we really good at?
Yes.
And let's have a bit of humility about what we're not good at and figure out other organizations that can do it better. And I think that's new for us as a sector, perhaps less so for some of the sectors that you're in, and certainly less so if you're in a startup. But I think for a lot of us, this has been a journey. And I think that level of openness, if I can sort of, move on a little bit to talk about new ways of opening up, I think is so important. And maybe, again, Ed, I'm going to come back to you if I can, because what I want to ask about is one of the challenges of open ecosystems versus open source. And I think we all recognize that open source is growing and it's accelerating, and it's been one of the key growth arenas for data science in particular. But at the same time, I think sometimes we see challenges with open source adoption in enterprise, and also getting open source to scale. How do you look at that as C3, and how do you make sure that you take advantage of what's out there whilst at the same time making it supportable and safe for the energy industry, which is, I guess, a critical thing to think through?
It's a good question on the trade-off and balance of open source. So to be clear, so we use open source in the product that we provide in the market. And so again, think of, just to give some context, the problems that our customers are solving, and Shell and Lyondell and Baker being representative of those, is basically massive data aggregation from massive sensor networks that are across large infrastructure. So at Shell, this might be a refinery like Pernis that's doing 400,000 barrels of oil, an offshore platform, etc. And so we're aggregating data from these sensor networks and systems, and then basically snapshotting it at any frequency and time, and then essentially serving that up to hundreds or thousands, in some cases millions of algorithms to process and make recommendations to people. Well, what I just said sounds conceptually straightforward, but actually takes orchestrating tens or hundreds of software services in precision to basically make happen. And some of those software services we actually take or use from the open source community. So it's things like key value stores, it's store telemetry, relational stores, etc. Are invaluable. And so we have a framework that basically orchestrates all of these technical components. And so open source plays an absolutely critical part in this whole arena. To turn to algorithms, because I think that's what you asked about, Dan, we have employed a slightly different tactic there, which is we actually formed a digital transformation institute within C3AI, which actually funds research grants to universities to do research in certain areas. So we actually started in healthcare, the COVID crisis. We stood up a data lake that we called the COVID data lake, which aggregated data from countless sources and unified it and made it available to researchers to do research. The next area we funded was energy and climate security. And essentially it's everything, algorithm development for smart grid, algorithm development for carbon capture and sequestration, algorithm development for climate modeling, sea rises, etc. And the idea is that university researchers develop these algorithms. And there's a key role for industry. Industry provide the data, which is what's missing from academia. So you can develop these algorithms, but unless you test them against real world data from Shell and Baker Hughes and Lyondell, you don't really know whether the algorithm actually has efficacy or not. And so they get tested against data sets from industry, and then finally they get published so that they're used with no charge to basically solve real world problems. So that's our open source contribution, Dan.
Oh, I love it. And for the academics in the room, if you haven't seen the C3 Digital Transformation Institute, do check it out. I would certainly recommend that. We were skeptical, Ed, I have to say, when we started.
You always are.
Yeah, but I think we've really seen the benefit of this and actually coming together, as you say, with the real data, which is really impressive, and credit to you guys for driving that. Jane, I want to sort of switch gears a little bit and talk about the commercial angle of this. You've thought a lot about this, I know, as Kongsberg, around how to stay open and accelerate things. And I know you've thought a lot about the concept of the marketplace. Maybe you want to unpack that a little bit and talk about how you see that and how actually you're creating commercial models that can help accelerate digital transformation as well.
Yeah. Geez, I got a nicer question than you. But yeah, so there's, I mean, with digitalization comes with different, you have to innovate around business models as well, right? We are an industrial software company. So really what we try to do is we try to codify our experience into our software. And our experience comes from, if you don't know Kongsberg, it's a 200-year-old Norwegian technology company. So we have a lot of experience on space, defense, maritime, oil and gas, energy, power and utilities. So each of those verticals have different commercial models kind of associated with them. So on the maritime, for example, what we set out to do was try to create this open marketplace for people to come in and have access to the information and the data infrastructure that we provided. So why could we do that as Kongsberg? There are probably 50 to 60,000 vessels that carry potatoes, cars, electronic chips, whatever around the world every single day, right? Kongsberg has technology on about 40,000 of them, and we follow 35,000 of them in real time through our Follow the Sun. It's typical Norwegian company, very quiet, very humble. No one knows this. So it was, and then they put an Irish guy in.
And now everyone knows about it.
That's why I'm here. So from there, what we said, look, we are ripe to just digitalize this. We can take all of the data, we can just push it into the cloud, and then we'll make it open. So there's loads of perceived competitors, once again here, that we opened it up to. And we said, look, yes, it's completely open. We take this piece because we're good at it and we're already basically there. And then you can build or extract the value on top of our value that we've created. And again, it's such a fragmented industry, the maritime. You had to do that. Commercially, we had to do it. We couldn't do it any other way. It's different in other verticals. You know, you can have large integrated energy operators. That's slightly different. Then we select partners that we like to work with. It makes it, Judit, we actually mentioned this. In that point of view, it's simplifying choice. Mm-hmm. Because the operators, it must be so complicated to look out there and go, you have thousands of startups, loads of technology companies trying to be startup or a digital company. So when partners can come together like this and go, look, this is an integrated solution and we solve X, you know, energy optimization or efficiency or, you know, chemical usage, you know, it really simplifies that choice and people are really, really happy. I'm sure you've gone through this landscape of just who do we select, how do we select? Yeah. It's a nightmare. Yeah. So commercially we have to be flexible. It's different for different industries, so there's no one check off for every single vertical, but it's about really being open-minded and being open in your approach. So that's really how we've approached that one. It's not solved yet. It's
never will be.
No.
Work in progress.
No, and I think maybe just one point that's striking me as we hear this conversation is just the potential impact of the organisations that we have around this table on energy transition. You know, that footprint on global vessels is just exciting, right? It's just amazing to hear the potential and the fact you're now trying to unlock that to drive impact is just so impressive. And
fuel efficiency 20% on some of these fleets. If you can do that across all vessels out there, it's a huge impact. And that's the thing about this whole, you know, sustainability net zero journey. There's no silver bullet. There's like 10 bronze bullets. I'm not sure, but it's the cumulative impact. It's all these small little things.
It's the scale.
Yeah,
it's the scale we operate.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just thank you to you guys for all that you're doing here. I mean, you know, that infrastructure is one of the things that's allowed us to unlock some of the algorithms we've been deploying. You know, 7% fuel efficiency on LNG vessels has been a huge impact. You know, it has a massive knock-on impact on CO2, and I think that goes to the point we started with around the impact this can have on sustainability. You know, just one algorithm, 7% fuel reduction, just amazing. Yeah. And that's where I want to go next as we head towards the close of this conversation. And Judit, I'm going to come to you. So you have the great privilege of looking across all of us in the energy sector and having a look and saying, how is it going? So how do you see the impact of digital transformation? Do you think it's impacting on energy transition? Do you see the companies transforming, or is it very frustrating?
I think we are progressing.
Good answer.
So that is the starting point. Couple of things to put in context why perhaps we haven't gone as fast as other industries. The first one is the nature of our industry. And is every time there is a new piece of technology in the market and you go to Shell, the first thing that Dan equivalent in engineering is going to say, what are your references, right? And so suddenly now we are asking that mindset in that industry to start saying, well, we might not even have the product or the algorithm built, but we will sort it. So that is a huge cultural transformation. The second one is the workforce in the field, in the oil and gas industry, is not the same workforce as in tech, like Google, Spotify. I can tell you they are not the same characters that you find in a refinery. And so suddenly when we have created all these super cool algorithms and now we have a lot of products and we tell the gentleman or the lady that is in 55 years old, hey, change the way you're working. Now this is going to sort out your problems. That person, the first thing that needs to think is, well, is it making my life easier? Because if not, I only have 5 more years before I retire. Just move on, have the next person when it comes. And so these are 2 elements that I think perhaps we underestimated in our transformation. And so the one ask, me being a little bit more farther removed from coding, creation, and development, the one ask that we have as a belief is we need to bring it down to simple things. In a way, we need to bring that consumer mindset into the industrial world. Because right now, before the challenge was a lot of data, it was unlocked and we didn't have all that data. Now that is not the problem. We have thousands and millions of data with another million of tools and platforms and apps and codes and you name it. And so always think that we still have a lot of 55-year-old people that now they're trying to run their operations, they're trying to bring now new fuels and how to drive the net zero. If we can only make now that digital experience seamless and integrate it into their today life, I think the acceleration is going to be.
Yeah.
And I was going to come to you next, Bill. On
No,
that.
absolutely. I was just going to build on a couple of great points you made. We were just chatting in the room back there, right? I mean, I think the first point was around, again, that open-mindedness. We're going after some problems, opportunities, challenges, working with Ed. And we're having to make a bit of a gamble inside the company. I'm a chemical engineer, right? I've been in this industry a long time. Typically, you don't go to your boss saying, please give me some money for this in our industry. Say, might not work. We'll come back in 3 months and walk and say, hey, congratulations, boss, it didn't work. That's not typically what we're good at, right? We have to learn to fail quickly. We have to learn to be a bit more innovative and experiment. So that notion of taking a bit of a bet with partners, with collaborations, to work on some big prizes and being more open to the prospect of perhaps not succeeding is one, a very good point you made. And the second point around this sort of 55-year-old operator, and one of the challenges is because we have that deep domain experience, when we come with these new solutions, they've got to be really good, because we're putting them in the hands of really experienced practitioners. So that change management, and then, because the big prize for us is the scale. It's not solving a point solution in one of our value chains, in one of our assets. It's global. And the change management works when people can really see the value that's making their lives better. And with real experts, that's harder than you think, because we've got a lot of experience running these big complex machines.
Dan, are we allowed to ask you questions?
Of course. Go ahead.
So Dan, you've done this.
Yeah.
You've deployed AI at massive scale. And I think Judit and Phil are basically putting their finger on the right point, which is change management is the hard part. We've solved the technology piece of it. So how did you handle that?
Well, it's funny. So I think Judith put it so well, right? I think that challenge of how do you make it easy for people to adopt the technology is so important. And that person who is currently faced with, I'm going to rip up the rule book on how you do your job and completely change everything. It's a really difficult conversation because actually they don't want to change. And there's an incentive, safety, security, not to. I think at Shell, the way that we went about it, we did a few things. So we looked at, firstly, building a community that wanted to drive change. And I think that's what I love about this festival, right? Is, I got hooked on this because it's a community that I believe wants to make a difference and wants to drive change, across startups, academia, government, industry. And I think it's the same thing for us internally. We needed to build a coalition of the willing. And we put together now about north of 7,000 people who have subscribed to what we call the Shell.ai network, which is an internal network that's looking to drive change. And to embed AI in every part of what we're doing. And I think that was fundamental to a lot of things we tried to do. I think the other thing that was so important was also trying to think about not doing it on our own. So I think the smartest thing I did was partner, because I think actually working with the folks here has really helped us, because we haven't had to do it all ourselves. We've had experts in the different areas that's helped us to accelerate our own progress. And I think the final thing really, which is key, has been leadership support. And I'm sure that's true as well for you, for all of you actually, that having the leadership support to take risk, to fail, to drive change, to try and really find new ways of doing things, with the ability to pivot and change direction. That for me has been core to our journey. And I think it's not easy. I think we would all acknowledge that. We're trying to do something really hard, and I guess I'm going to finish this with a bit of an appeal, which is, one of the reasons I think we all want to do this is that this is a sector that really needs digital innovation. And it's a really exciting space to work. It's really hard, but the opportunity to have impact on the global energy system is unbelievable. And I find that deeply exciting. And I think also, going back to the question there, that North Star of why are we doing it? We're doing it because there's an opportunity to help to drive a transformation in the global energy system, which in turn can have an impact on global CO2 emissions and climate change. For me, that's a really compelling purpose and gets me really excited.
Punctuate one point you made, which is the fail fast. I mean, the way we think about it is, and this might be consistent across the board, is we'll take an area and do what we call a production pilot. The production pilot is very limited in its scope, but it demonstrates the steel thread, so to speak, and it does it no more than 3 to 4 months, and it typically does it with a very small team, pizza-size team, as we like to say. So, and if you can take the data that exists in the organization and then basically configure an algorithm to demonstrate that you can improve reliability by X% or improve process optimization by Y%, whatever it is you're trying to do, and don't do it for all systems, just pick one and knock it out in 3 to 4 months. And the investment is not very large. And then basically, if you can't get it to work, then move on to something else. But it's finite.
That's right.
So,
no, and I think that summarizes it all, right? I think one of the big things about this is thinking big with the macro goal and starting small and then being able to scale fast.
And that's been new for us, right? Because we've not been agile in that way before. So for our industry to get working that way has been quite a transformation, like we said, many of our successes. Just like that, start small, prove it, get the traction, and then go big.
But I think what you were touching on, just last point there, you were touching on like the user empathy is really what it comes down to, because not everyone is digitally savvy in this situation. And it's like we specifically call ourselves industrial software company, right? Because it's about understanding those, the industry you're working to and the end users per se. So one of where that really stands out, and it in a sense, it helps the acceleration, it helps increase the success of a POC. I'm not saying you're going to be successful 100% of the time, but when we collaborate around one of the Shell assets where we had people from your team, people from my team sitting down, we're integrating technology and we're trying to solve something specifically, because your team came from the industry. It was so easy. It was just so easy because, you have the software developers and the data scientists, but fronting that are industrial specialists that just fundamentally know what the challenge you're trying to solve, and things just went really, really fast. And one of the things that really helped us as a development house, as a software house, was, because I'm a chemical engineer as well, I was a little bit biased, two of us, a little bit biased. Chemical engineering software was, I pulled out all my product owners that were pure developers and I put in industrial specialists. So they had a Scrum team and development team on the back end, but now the people dictating how that is used, how it looks, how it feels, comes from the industry. And that really sped up a lot of the adoption on some of the workflows of the applications that we're able to take out. And that's something we only did in the last year and a half. Just the last year and a half. It's so obvious looking back, but it's really important that we have that.
Domain knowledge on the team is absolutely right.
Yeah.
I'm going to open it up at this point because I think, hopefully there may be some questions in the audience and hopefully some really tough ones. I don't know if anyone's brave enough to.
Ed will answer.
I can take the whole.
I'll give you one to start. It's about dealing with the very senior management. Sorry, I'll start again. It's about dealing with the very senior management and the sort of institutional think, which sort of goes as follows, which is, I don't mind what you give away in working with the opposition, but make sure it's something that we don't value that they do value. How do you get around that kind of senior management objection?
I'm going to go to Judit on that. I know you've had a lot of getting senior management on board.
I want to say you also need to be a little bit disruptive, even with your own management team, and understanding. So you need to be politically aware what is value for a competition and what are the priorities within the company. But you also need to be a little bit of a disruptor within the enterprise for you to be able to move. Because we've only done business in the way that we've done it in the past doesn't mean that that's the way we will need to do business in the future. I'm going to call myself, I'm a little bit of that disruptive within the space in Baker Hughes. But always I know that I have the sponsorship of that leadership team that Dan was referring. So our CEO is very much involved throughout the journey. It is very much supportive that even if we fail, even if we don't have immediate return on investment or the number that we would expect, we acknowledge how difficult this is. And so unless you don't put money at work, you will not get the return. But what I would say is be wise, but be disruptive.
I think as well, just building on that, I think one approach you can take is some of the problems we're facing are cross-industry. They're not unique. And if we don't fix them, that's a threat to the business. So I think if you recognise that, and if you also overlay on that the fact that we probably can't fix it alone, and we need to fix it, that's a good way, I think, of getting the dialogue around.
Yeah, sustainability is
the obvious
areas.
one where it transcends the traditional boundaries of the value chain. So we have to be able to think much bigger and be prepared to be more open to help solve the problems. We've been a bit blinkered and we've been too slow. So I think we need to be quicker. And I think opening that view at the horizon will only help. So that's one way you can counter those arguments, which we all get.
Love it. Another question here.
Yeah, the question really is about digital transformation. So when you talk about digital transformation, are we really transformative? Because, most cases, we rather talk about digital optimization, I think, because many companies I found are talking about digital transformation a lot, but really what they're doing is optimization because they don't want to challenge their current business models. Mm-hmm. Because if you are truly transformative, you're actually challenging your current business model and actually challenge that, and you might need to look for alternatives where you can make your business in the future. So the question here is really, are we truly transformative in energy, and how are we going to make sure we're going to do that?
I'm going to say one thing quickly and then I'll throw it open. I think the one thing that's really interesting is I think we have to be, because my view is that energy transition is currently challenging everything we do anyway. And I think if there's one sector that's really open right now to digital transformation, I would say it's energy, because so much is changing and people are having to rethink the way that they work. But Phil,
I think absolutely. I mean, I think we think of it not as digital transformation, but as business transformation enabled through digital. We're not just about digitizing things for the sake of digitizing things. We recognize, and we've had some learnings where we go and digitize a broken process. Crazy, right? We make a bad process look more digital. Yeah. So no, we're having to rethink, how we service our customers in this industry. We will transform how we do that, and digital technology will be a key player there. We operate in quite an old-fashioned way in this industry, and that's changing fast. Our customers' needs are changing, so transforming is very much, there will be an element of optimization in some of the assets, but certainly transforming the business processes is very much part of the journey that we're on. It's business transformation enabled through digital.
But I think just quickly picking up on that, the digitalization, everyone was on a platform journey, an analytics journey, whatever, back in the day. But if you don't link it to a business process, it's meaningless. It's genuinely meaningless. And this is where we talk a lot about bad business processes, because every asset has a defined business process for supply chain, operations, maintenance, etc. But a lot of them are in silos as well. So more and more you hear people talking about convergence of workflows, because that's where you can have an impact. You can take out that waste when one workflow can enable another workflow, or it can be filled in with an algorithm rather than having a human data bus. It's crazy in our industry. It's very manumatic. People are handling a lot of data and paper-based kind of systems, and incremental change is no good. You have to have fundamental change, and it's not just about a business model change, it's convention change, regulations, policy changes. There's a lot of things you can't do. We can't write back to a control system today, even though technically you can do it. You can fully automate that, but they won't allow it because it's a safety critical system. So it has to be tested, proved, etc. over time. So there's lots of things to be changed.
And that point brings us right back to change management, because change management is transforming the business process. Is it big change management?
And I've heard this summarized quite succinctly in GHG and sustainability is the first thing you want to do is eliminate it. That is substantial change. And the second is reduce it. That's an optimization problem, an efficiency problem. The third is mitigation, but you don't do the last one until you've fully exhausted the first two. So that's a nice way to summarize it. And I think at Lyondell, the work that you all are doing with Circuline and recycling is massive. Massive business transformation.
Our business is transforming hugely to a much more circular. We've been very linear. That's a massive transformation for the industry, and we're right in the middle of it. And digital technology is going to be absolutely central to that transformation. There's no doubt about it.
And with that, I'm conscious that the clock is red. And I just want to say thank you to my panelists for a really lively and hopefully very interesting conversation. Thank you to you all for coming as well. I think it's been a fantastic dialogue. I will say, check out the Open AI Energy Initiative if you haven't done so already. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you.